continues. Up next, we talk with Larry Agran, the former mayor of Irvine, California. He is expected to formally announce as a 1992 Democratic presidential candidate on August 22nd. Mr. Agran is a graduate of the University of California and Harvard Law School. He served as a member of the Irvine City Council and later mayor for 12 years, losing his re-election bid last year. Our guest will discuss his political ideology and just why he intends to seek his party's nomination.
Larry Agran, why are you a candidate for President of the United States?
I want to be a voice for the cities and towns, the people who live in the cities and towns of America. As someone who has had the opportunity to serve on a city council for 12 years, to be mayor of my city for 6 years. I served at a time during the 1980s when we saw resources systematically drained from America's cities and towns, all in the name of national security, sending these funds abroad to defend our national security interests when in fact people were increasingly insecure at home, losing health care opportunities, losing out on opportunities for education, watching pervasive violence, drug addiction, overtake our cities. Struggling against those problems, it became very clear to me that unless and until we change and dramatically change federal priorities, we aren't going to see American genuine national security improve in our cities and towns.
Of what city were you mayor?
I was the mayor of Irvine, California, which is an interesting community. It's a planned community. Over 100,000 people live there. It's a relatively large city, geographically and in terms of population as well. It's also in the heart of conservative Republican Orange County, and I, of course, am a Democrat. That made me a novelty, and I think in many respects led to a sense of pride in what we managed to achieve during that period.
And you are running for president as a Democrat?
I am running as president as a Democrat, yes.
What, in addition to your public service background, do you believe to be your strongest qualifications for the job?
Well, in addition to having served at the local level for 12 years and having been mayor of my city, I also was legal counsel to the State Senate Health and Welfare Committee in California. I've been involved in trying to address the general welfare for many, many years. I'm an attorney. I went to the University of California at Berkeley as an undergraduate, to Harvard Law School, and I've had the opportunity to write a book about cancer policy and otherwise be involved in public policy since the early 1970s. But the opportunity to serve at the local level and to really make a difference in terms of the quality of life in my community, and to join with other mayors to speak out on the issues that concerned us, all this in the midst of the Reagan-Bush military buildup that was draining our cities and towns of resources, led me to conclude that unless and until we have the kinds of candidates and the kind of debate at the national level that can change those federal priorities, we aren't going to see the genuine kind of national security measured in health care, in improved transportation, in diminished crime and violence, in improved housing for our people, in all the day-to-day qualities and features that really define what American life is and should be about.
How are you conducting your campaign?
I intend to take the campaign city hall to city hall around this country. I'm going to be visiting Iowa, I'm going to be visiting New Hampshire, of course spending a good deal of time in California as well, and going into the city halls of this country, meeting not just with mayors and council members, but with the public employees, the police officers, and others who serve our needs each and every day, but who also are finding it increasingly difficult to do so because of all the money that we are spending on the defense of Western Europe, on the defense of Japan, all this nearly 2 years after the Berlin Wall has come down. I would think that in visiting these city halls, we'll have an opportunity as well to relate directly to the people in those communities who either work at City Hall or who come to City Hall for city council meetings. I'm going to be asking mayors and city council members for the opportunity to address city council meetings, to take 15 minutes or maybe even a half hour of their time to talk about the issues that I regard as important, and to encourage them to invite other candidates to do the same thing.
As a politician, you know the importance of early money in any campaign at any level. What's the status of your fundraising at this point?
We have a fundraising budget that will have us raising about $75,000 to $100,000 a month between now and the first primaries and caucuses. That, with the federal matching funds, should provide over $1 million, which would be the spending limit in Iowa and New Hampshire when you add the two together. And that's the core budget. Beyond that, of course, we're hopeful that as the campaign takes hold, that we might be able to selectively use direct mail and other techniques that would add to that core budget and render our campaign competitive from the very beginning.
From what you've said so far, it appears that you place great emphasis on the role of cities. How do you expect to campaign in two early states that are essentially rural, New Hampshire and Iowa?
Well, it's interesting. They aren't really rural. People live in cities and towns. As a matter of fact, Iowa has the third largest number of cities of any state in the United States, just about 1,000 cities. And New Hampshire has a good many towns. People live in community settings that are either cities or towns, and I think I have a message that will resonate with them. People are going to be asking, why is it that we spend $200 billion a year on the defense of cities and towns in Western Europe, in Japan, when our cities, Dallas, Denver, New York City, Des Moines, Manchester, when all of these cities are increasingly insecure and when the quality of life is so sadly diminished.
What motivates you in the face of, I think, what you'll acknowledge to be long odds?
I have to believe that the American system has the capacity to accommodate a message of substance, where candidates of quality committed to a message of substance can carry that message out to the American people, and in so doing be given the opportunity not only to be heard, but to be supported. The Democratic Party, I'm sure it comes as no secret to you, is a party in search of its soul at this point. And I'd like to be a part of rebuilding the Democratic Party in keeping with its liberal tradition of strong sense of social justice and economic justice, and free of the Cold War. You know, here we are 2 years just about after the collapse of the Berlin Wall, the ascendancy of democracy throughout Central Europe and even into the Soviet Union, and we're still spending on average about $2,000 per American family to provide for the defense of Western Europe and Japan. It's time to bring those dollars back home and let the Europeans provide for their own defense and get about the business here at home of rebuilding America.
What is your perspective on the several or a few key Democratic figures who have publicly declined to run for the office that you seek? What does that say about the Democratic Party, and what does it say about your chances?
Well, I think it's very sad that acknowledged leaders of our party kind of slipped off the main stage, apparently more concerned about their personal political security than about the fact that this is an hour of desperation, not just for our party, but for our country. If we can't turn things around and begin to rebuild our financial institutions, provide decent health care, stop laying off teachers and start hiring teachers, if we can't do these things, and if we as Democrats can't deliver on that kind of a message, then we have to ask ourselves, what are we doing as a political party, and what are we doing as an American people?
Assuming you receive the nomination and there is a televised debate with the incumbent president, what would be your lead point face-to-face with George Bush?
I would like to make one point absolutely clear. I would like to challenge the president to spend as much time and express as much concern about the quality of life here at home as he seems to be expressing with regard to the quality of life and democratic values elsewhere. There's that song, Blowing in the Wind. How many times can a man look the other way in the face of all of the things that are troubling our society? The song put it more beautifully than that, but I can tell you that this is a president who campaigned claiming that he was haunted by the vision of homeless people and desperation in our cities and towns, and yet we have more debt, more homelessness, more hunger, and indeed a deprived society in so many respects. All of it can be turned around but we have to change our federal priorities, and I think that's the principal challenge that has to be made to this administration.
Let's assume further in my hypothetical debate that between yourself and George Bush that he turns around and points out that you have no experience in foreign policy. What's your response to that?
Well, of course, nobody but the President of the United States can have all the experience of a commander-in-chief. However, many of us have substantial experience in foreign policy. I've been involved as a mayor of a city in trade relations, building a World Trade Center in our own community, in seeing to it that we established sister city ties. I visited Vietnam as part of a family reunification effort. I think I was the first American mayor to visit Vietnam and successfully bring the reunification of a family on that basis. I've also been instrumental in working with other mayors in anti-apartheid policies and in global environmental policies. One of my proudest achievements is that the city of Irvine was the first city to adopt a comprehensive ordinance controlling CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons, and other ozone-depleting compounds. And the importance of this was that it was adopted by other cities, replicated all over this country, and indeed was acknowledged by the United Nations as the leading step in reversing ozone depletion that has been taken in recent history. This is something that can be done as a city, and it's evidence of a new element, a new dimension of foreign policy, namely environmental protection.
Mr. Agran, in the moments remaining to us, give us an idea of your personal background, where you grew up and that sort of thing.
Yes, I'm a product of the best that a liberal democratic society had to offer. I was educated in the public schools in California, went to the University of California system, I became a lawyer through the Harvard Law School, returned to California to serve as legal counsel to the State Senate Health and Welfare Committee.
Are you married?
I'm married. My wife was an admittee and has gone on to become a graduate and practicing physician, a pediatric gastroenterologist. We have one son. We live in Irvine, California, and we would like for the children of our society to have the kinds of opportunities that we had, my wife had, and I had as children in America.
Thank you, Larry Agran, candidate for President of the United States.
Thank you.
Road to the White House is C-SPAN's weekly look at the 1992 presidential campaign. Join us each week for a look at the candidates and the issues shaping the race. Join us next week for a look at the Federal Election Commission. Joan Eikens, Vice Chairman of the Commission, will discuss how the agency provides matching funds to presidential candidates. Also next week, you will see campaign appearances by former Senator Paul Tsongas and Senator Tom Harkin of Iowa. Meanwhile, if you have any questions or comments on our programming, please write to us. Our address is C-SPAN, 400 North Capitol Street Northwest in Washington, D.C., 20001.